Good morning from Kingston, Jamaica, and welcome to part two in a series of online discussions by the Tourism Linkages Network, a division of the Tourism Enhancement Fund, an agency of the Ministry of Tourism. Now, I'm your moderator and host for this morning, Taisha Turner, Director of Tourism Trade and International Relations in the Ministry of Tourism. As a background, the Tourism Linkages Network plays an essential role in supporting the tourism industry's goal of achieving growth and development targets through the creation and strengthening of linkages between local suppliers of goods and services and the tourism industry. The network continues to play a key role in creating collaborative relationships that build capacity and sustainability, which we know are drivers of socioeconomic advancement. The work of the Tourism Linkages Network impacts stakeholders across a number of industries and sectors, specifically agriculture, manufacturing, gastronomy, sport and entertainment, shopping, health and wellness, and knowledge. Since 2016, the network has executed projects and programs which have provided opportunities for local suppliers to access the tourism supply chain, as well as to contribute to the diversification of Jamaica's tourism products using these passion points: gastronomy, health and wellness, knowledge, shopping, sport and entertainment. Have you identified your passion? Now, the Knowledge Network, in keeping with its objective to foster the growth of the tourism knowledge economy, has engaged in the development of strong intellectual and practical partnerships and linkages from which knowledge can be leveraged and applied. Now, if you joined us in November, we focused on the Blue Ocean Strategy, and this is the Ministry of Tourism's strategic framework for resetting tourism. This month, our focus turns to the emerging technological trends in tourism, as technology plays an important role for businesses involved in this industry. From online bookings to client communication, the rise of technology is truly transforming the travel sector. It can boost the client experience and efficiency of business operations. With tourist behaviors and expectations changing over time, technology has helped travel businesses to provide an enhanced experience. Doesn't that sound fun? Today, no one doubts that technology and travel are the perfect combination, as various technological innovations are also being used by businesses in the industry in order to make traveling safer and more convenient. As a traveler, I certainly enjoy and welcome that. But don't take my word for it. This morning, we have some distinguished panelists with us who are going to take us through possibly some examples like augmented reality, virtual reality, self check in, robots, virtual assistants, recognition technology. And we're going to hear from them soon. We have Ed Limon, who is the co founder and creative digital media director of Winged Whale Media. We also have Ambassador Dr. Neil Parsan, CEO of Delta Health Partners, Daniel Z. Pigot, co-founder and CEO of Pink Coconuts Barbados, and James Elsmore, founder and the managing director of Island Innovation. Welcome to all our panelists. And to our audience, a pleasant welcome. I see Ed waving there. He's going to be our first speaker. To our audience, welcome to today's panel. And if you're not yet doing so, please go and follow the Tourism Enhancement Fund on all its social media platforms at TEF Jamaica. You can do that right now. Now, Ed Limon is the co-founder and creative digital media director, as I've said earlier, at the international award-winning studio Winged Whale Media. They have won the International Telly Awards for Immersive and Mixed Reality, as well as gold winner of the International Creative Hermes Award. Now, Ed has developed strategies for both consumer and agent training markets. He's a member of the Tourism Industry of Ontario, SCAL International, the Global VR AR Association for those of us, VR is virtual reality, AR augmented reality, the Brampton Board of Trade, the Speakers Bureau of Canada, and the Business Improvement Association. Ed also specializes in, you guessed it, VR, 360 video, and AR. And when I asked him earlier, what was his favorite technology for travel and tourism? What did he say? VR and AR. So Ed, over to you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate this opportunity to be able to speak to all of you today. I want to thank also the Tourism Linkage Network and the Ministry of Tourism of Jamaica and the Tourism Enhancement Fund organization just for this wonderful opportunity to be able to be with you all today. And for this opportunity to be able to speak to you about virtual and augmented reality, which is something I'm very passionate about within the travel and tourism industry. So I want to start off with a quick story, true story. I was at the International Travel and Tourism Show for Montreal, and we were facilitating for a Caribbean partner of yours, Antigua and Barbuda. At the time, we were facilitating with various different VR headsets back in 2017. And I'll never forget the story, guys. I remember this gentleman passing through in a wheelchair, and he sees the VR headsets, and he's like, "Can I try that on?" Absolutely. So we get him mounted on the VR headset. And as he starts looking and exploring and checking out the island, I'll never forget, this story is just so emotional to me, because I remember him taking off the VR headset and tears were just streaming down his eyes. He was just crying. And then he said, "I will never be able to do those things." And then luckily, the director of tourism at the time, Colin Scarrett, went to go shake his hand. And he said to this gentleman that you see here in this image, he goes, "Sir, I can tell you that Antigua and Barbuda is handicap friendly. And here's why." Now, really, really important is the symbolism behind this story. Because at the end of the day, what happens at a trade show? You go to a trade show and you're grabbing brochures and flyers and you're putting it in your goodie bag and you're just going from booth to booth and just grabbing stuff. But what grabbed my attention was the way he grabbed his brochure at that booth. All of a sudden, that clenching of the brochure just piqued my interest because it became a possibility now. It became a plausibility that he can actually go and with the stingrays, that he can go on the helicopter ride, to go on the kayak experience, right? And right before our eyes, he booked a package because he was immersed. He felt it was so real. He was there. It did not replace the real experience. VR can never do that, but it can educate you. It can entice you. It can inspire you to want to go. On that note, another experience that we had over at the WestJet show that they hosted to train and to educate travel agents from across Canada. I was facilitating for Fiesta Americana, a hotel chain across the Caribbean and in Mexico. And we had our VR headsets on there. And one of the travel agents that passed by, he's like, "Oh, I love this technology." And he puts on the VR headset and he starts looking around. You could tell it's so easy. He's done this before. And so I asked him out of curiosity, "So what is it? Why do you love this so much?" And he says to me, "Oh man, I have a brick and mortar shop, and my friend, it is my go-to when it comes down to selling." And so what happens, he's got his brochures and his flyers, but he always gets his customers to go on a VR headset. And they look around and they're sold. Right where I am, that's what I want. Here's my credit card. So his ROI experience, his experience with technology, he uses the headsets all the time in regards to having showcase and promotional material to promote destinations. Now, why am I sharing these stories with you? Because VR and AR technology is absolutely powerful. Studies have proven that they awaken the senses, and the retention rate is incredible. I don't know if you guys knew this, but the retention rate when you wear, let's say, a VR headset is upwards of 80% versus traditional video being upwards of 20%. And those results in contrast are significant. And why? Let's say, for example, you're watching a traditional video or even at a Zoom event, and the distractions can be quite a bit. You're on your phone, you receive a text, you're sending an email. There are various different distractions. Versus in a VR headset, it's very simple. There are no distractions, right? You are immersed, feeling like you're there, being educated in whatever the strategy is that was evolved within the VR experience. It's absolutely phenomenal. So these innovative trends are proving to be a great asset in these delicate times that we're living in right now. And we know that 2020 to right now, there's been some unfortunate challenges due to the pandemic, cancellations on events, limiting fam trips and mice events, low website engagement, people being more picky as they're booking their tourism experience, regulations in government. And so all these limitations that have occurred due to the pandemic. But I have a question for you. Rather a funny yet serious question. How many wish they had stocks in Zoom prior to the pandemic? And let's be honest, how many of you actually use Zoom and or actively use video conferencing tools before the pandemic? No way, right? Everyone that did not know how to use a video conferencing tool, no matter how old you were, had their hands forced. And that's kind of like a motto that I normally bring up. Our hands were forced to adapt, to learn and adapt into different directions and how to continue life as we know it, to communicate with one another. And it's quite simple. Not only do we have to adapt, we had to innovate. And if you didn't reinvent the wheel, then the economy would not have survived this pandemic. So we all adapted and continued to adapt. And let me be honest. Everybody that's invested in VR, AR tech prior to the pandemic had the tools that helped them to stand out and to reach the markets during the pandemic. So leveraging the innovative tools that gave them a tremendous edge. And here's a perfect example. With Tourism Australia, they launched a virtual reality 360 video campaign. And the stats that they've been able to bring forth are absolutely phenomenal. Some of the ones that really grab my attention here, that their VR AR campaign helped them drive engagement on their website, a rise of upwards of 64%, and a retention rate exceeding 8 minutes. As you guys know, on a website, I mean, how long do you last on a landing page, right? If you make it up to a minute, that's amazing. But they boast 8 minutes of retention. And then they had a whopping 10.5 million views from the 360 videos that they shared across their distribution platforms, such as social media and their website. Again, people are just exploring, and they were immersed as they were looking around, not on a VR headset. Another that grabbed my attention was the Texas Tourism Authority. They did a mobile VR campaign. And then their boasting here is that their campaign boasted non-Texas tourist visits by upwards of 25% and held an engagement rate of 22%, which was 4.5 times higher than the average mobile video campaign that they've done before. So down to a serious note, I need to thank the gaming industry for the launches that they've done, from all the way Atari, Nintendo, Sega, PlayStation, Xbox, you name it. That transition has been very, very interesting, where you play on a console, and then all of a sudden you're starting to play games on a computer, and now you can start playing games on mobile phones and tablets. So that transition has been really, really cool to see. But what really grabs my attention, guys, we start to look at the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. And the numbers show us that platforms like this game called Fortnite, you've got active users on the platform of upwards of 350 million active users. And these are young adults all the way up to probably 30, 40 years of age, but kids that are going on this platform, and they just embrace it. And it's a 360 environment on your desktop, on your mobile, and you look around and you shoot each other up, and you get to socialize with one another and creating new worlds. And other platforms have followed suit, and Roblox and Minecraft. The list goes on and on. But I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of this one. Pokemon Go launched in 2017, and they boasted 350 million active users. This is revolutionary in augmented reality. And in augmented reality, you're putting 3D models in the real world, and you get to interact with them. I am so grateful for gamification that has opened Pandora's box, as I call it, has opened up opportunities to be able to learn and engage and explore and have fun while you're doing at it. You're not just reading a brochure anymore. You're not just reading watching a video. Now you're engaging and you're interacting in real time, real space. I'll share a fun one with you. We were doing a VR campaign in the US, and as we crossed the border, hilarious. I'll never forget this. There was a customs officer who was looking at our VR camera, and he's looking around, and then at the customs office, there was like some kind of commotion going on, and I can just see him just going, like, looking over yonder, and he looked in disgust. He was like, ugh. And I'm thinking, like, illegal drug bust or like, what was going on? And his words were, oh, I hate Pokemon Go. It's like, well, why do you hate Pokemon Go? Oh, because right now that's like, I don't know, we've lost count how many people go into our customs office grabbing a Pokemon, and they just happen to be there, and these Pokemons are everywhere. And so I'm like, in that sense, as annoying as that may sound, I was like, yes, that's awesome. People are really embracing the technology. And then you've got this adaptation of AR, right? How about marrying, how about having, you adapt Pokemon Go and you adapt it to produce interactive wayfinding experiences. So now you got AR real case scenarios where you can have different icons and Bluetooth technology that will allow you to be able to interact with your island. Or how about marrying both virtual reality into augmented reality by clicking on a hotspot on a map, and now pops out a VR experience from your AR app? Or how about integrating analytics, push notifications, hotspots, like I mentioned, or interactive scavenger hunts that can tie in local vendors to also take advantage of being promoted? Or how about using virtual and augmented reality to help with your fam trips, trade shows, training travel agents, PR marketing agencies, and the press? This is one at WTM 2019. They had a whole booth just dedicated to virtual reality. On the other side of the booth was their normal booth, but on this side, a whole dedicated floor just on VR tech. Now, here's a piece that I want to share with you guys. Oh. And apparently there was no linkage. In regards to a piece that we did for a cruise ship called Pullman Tour Cruises. And so I'm just going to share just some snippets with you. No voice for this one. I've muted it so I can kind of explain some of the strategies that we produce for Pullman Tour Cruise. So as you can see here, you've got someone talking directly to you, and you've got some inserts of a picture-in-picture videos that would pop up that would reinforce what it is that you're looking at. So it's not just a 360 video that looks pretty, that looks professional, but now you've got interactive voiceover. Now you've got people talking directly to you. The results for this were astounding because they wanted to use this. Pullman Tour Cruises, they flew us down to the ABC Islands and South America, and we were we created this VR campaign for them to be able to train the travel agents from a B2B and a B2C perspective. As you can tell, that's handsome old me over here. So again, you're looking over at individuals talking directly to you, waiters and excursionists and so forth. So I'll just stop that there. But the results were phenomenal. At the end of the day, we ended up winning 3 international awards for this piece. Okay, going back here. On this next piece here is a virtual reality. Andrew, I'm going to need you to cue this up here. A virtual reality, a 360 experience on a platform called Engage. Now, there's different kinds of distribution models on how to distribute this, but how about just like those Fortnite type analogies on a serious sense, where you have like this event here, we had PR, we had press, travel agents. We all went on this fun fam trip together, exploring virtual reality as you know it, and interacting with one another. Andrew, can you play this one for us?
Okay, great. Is that everybody? Everyone's here?
right, colleagues. There are some options on your mouse or your device.
I want to wish you much success with this very special occasion, Skull's first virtual reality event.
And just a reminder that the 3D audio is on, so you have to get relatively close to another person for them to hear you, just like in the real world. We actually built the Engage platform, and Winged Well are one of our partners. We think the travel industry can benefit a lot from virtual reality.
We're here in this kind of expo hall right now, and we could see very easily how this could be used for trade shows and networking and connecting. One of the important things that we see this kind of platform being used for is education in the travel industry. And so you can look around the entire room and see the experience, see how people interact with the services, to get a sense of what the product is like.
All right, so is everybody on the beach? Look at that. We have Mark with us, our Vice President for Skull Canada. Where do you go?
I saw a gentleman walk off into the ocean.
He's in the ocean. Oh, there he is.
I saw him with the
Hey, Mark, did you have a nice swim? How was the swim?
It's an experience that you can't have anyplace else.
To fellow colleagues everywhere.
To fellow colleagues everywhere.
Happiness. Good health. Friendship. Long life. Skull.
Wonderful. No, he did not get wet or get lost into the ocean as he was going in there, but it was really fun. It was a lot of fun to be able to see the different avatars interacting with one another, exploring, talking to each other. And the perk here is not everybody, in fact, majority of those attendees were not wearing a headset. I was, but there was other individuals that were attending through their mobile phone or through their desktop, Mac or Microsoft, doesn't matter, PC. So it's really cool to have that universal accessibility in platforms like this. So again, just want to emphasize, I'm not trying to say that that VR and AR technology is there to replace the real experience. Nothing does. You can't replace the sand, the feeling of the sand beneath your toes, or the warm wind of the Caribbean. But this technology helps to inspire, to educate, to entice. And there's various different distribution models that have shown great success in regards to how you can implement this through social media. You can implement this through your different devices, like I mentioned. But there's also interactive VR sites, like I mentioned, the Engage platform. There's AltSpace. Facebook just launched their beta version of Horizon, Wanda VR, Spatial, and so many like that are similar to what I just shared with you in the Skull video. And that's the thing. At the end of the day, I mean, everyone's talking about the new normal. We can't really think like that, though. The way I like to look at it, we need to look at the next normal. What is next? What is up and coming? How can we pivot to be able to continue adapting? And we have to reinvent the wheel. I don't have enough time to share some more wonderful videos, but here's another one of a gentleman that just went through a clinical, beautiful experience going through a virtual reality. And I'm telling you guys, I can assure you, this is not a fad. The medical results on the medical field, let alone tourism, are astounding. There's been clinical results in regards to using VR and AR technology to help with dementia, depression, anxiety, and so many others. So again, I bring that up because VR technology is here to stay. It has not only scratched the surface, but it will become a part of the next normal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed. When you consider over 1 billion persons in the world are living with disabilities, and you have more than 2 billion who are either spouses, children, or caregivers for these persons with disabilities, that's almost a third of the world's population that is directly impacted by disabilities. So it represents a huge potential market for travel and tourism. But not only that, and I think this is the more important bit, is that it really does enable all people to participate in and enjoy tourism experiences. And you touched on, you segued nicely for our next speaker when you spoke of some of the applications of AR And VR, the next normal, we're always evolving for medical use. And our next speaker is Ambassador Dr. Neil Parsan, who is a former member of the Foreign Service of Trinidad and Tobago, a medically trained global health policy consultant, energy advisor, and management consultant. He's the co-founder and managing director of Parson Cross, a Washington, D.C.-based global strategic advisory firm. He currently serves as senior advisor at Dentons, the world's largest law firm, and served as special advisor to the World Bank Group. He's also the founder and chairman of Your 24/7 Doc, a telehealth company bringing digital healthcare to those most in need, and he's CEO of Delta Health Partners. Dr. Parson, you have a lot on your plate, but when I spoke to him about his favorite technology for travel and tourism, it was so simple, and I liked it because sometimes we forget our very own, our smartphones, our technology. Well, I certainly forget. I use it to call and text, but there's so many applications on your smartphone, and that was his favorite technology as it related to travel and tourism. So Dr. Parson, you have the floor to tell us about the emerging trends, the technological trends for travel and tourism, and more specifically as it relates to health and wellness. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Turner, and good morning to all of you. And I don't think it's too late, but Happy New Year 2022 to all of you. You know, when we reflect on 2021, we realize it was a year of, constant push and pull. We saw where the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, and we saw evidence of sharpening the focus on innovation. And Ed touched a great deal on a number of things that I think would be of interest to the global community going forward. And we also saw some new challenges. We saw supply chain bottlenecks. We saw escalating weather disasters. We are in an unfortunate era of disinformation. And I think technology in 2022 would have a big role to play in correcting some of these challenges we have been seeing. Ed, you call it next normal. I like that. I think it's a good way to put it. And I think in this next normal, I think tech and industry players will be rethinking what they produce and how they produce it. I think it represents huge opportunities, particularly for the tourism sector and my particular area of focus and expertise, which is the healthcare industry. So I would like to touch probably on a few general trends I think that will be happening in 2022, and then narrow it down to a bit of the healthcare. I think we will be seeing the next wave of telehealth coming through. I'm an owner of a telehealth company. It's fascinating since the development of that company and where technology is going, how that has been supplemented and improved. I think we'll see an era of big companies, retailers, telecoms getting into that remote patient monitoring market. And that's believe it or not, an over $30 billion market. And that remote patient monitoring market has a lot of staying power. And for those of you who may not be aware, it's one of those industries and technologies where we can track your vitals and metrics sitting anywhere. So you could be on the beach in Jamaica and being monitored in a hospital at home model. And think of how that can actually change the way tourism and healthcare form a union. And it is a model that's taking off, especially in lieu of the lockdowns we have had during COVID and the overburdening of our hospitals, etc., in periods of great demand and surge. And I think it's a way forward for us. We have invested through Delta in some very interesting technologies, including something as simple as a COVID passport electronically on your phone. That will have a direct effect on your tourism product. The efficiency and the ease of that sync will be helpful. We have also been looking at technologies. For example, you go into a booth, it could be in a mall, it could be at the airport. You sit, you close the door behind you after you swipe your credit card, and 360 around you have cameras and a full clinic in a booth as big as a telephone booth, talking to a doctor and doing a video conference call. So that's where I think the technology is going. We have seen Apple investing in a great deal of technology. It is rumored that Apple will be coming out shortly with watches and devices that will be testing your glucose levels, your blood pressure, your body temperature. Understand what that means. And Stanford actually did some work and tracked some of these metrics on your Apple Watches and found that there is a correlation, for example, in this remote monitoring using your watches and a patient's heart. So while you are moving about your daily business, you are actually being monitored in a good way for healthcare improvement. We see Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all of those investing in technologies like Nest, Fitbits, Azure, etc. And I think that's going to be a big for the digital biomarkers industry, where these technologies would be able to pick up, Eddie touched on it, anxiety, depression, even Alzheimer's, before the fact, before you actually know that you're getting into that mode or that disease state. We touched on the whole issue of using AI, artificial intelligence. We saw earlier in the earlier presentation in the use of virtual reality. Apple, for instance, will be launching their AR, VR sets coming up, hopefully this year in 2022. And that has the potential to launch what we call digital therapeutics, where we actually be looking at behavioral changes and disease management before it happens in a VR world, in a virtual reality world. I think another big trend that we'll be seeing is, net zero or bust. Tackling climate change is becoming a massive industry. I think a lot of consumers are actually spending their money on what we call sustainability-focused brands, especially in the area of food, energy, fashion, transport. And a lot of companies are now pivoting, and it has to happen in the Caribbean, and I'm hoping it happens, and I'm seeing evidence of it happening, where a lot of CEOs are now talking about ESG, environmental, social governance, and I know one of our speakers will be touching on the social aspects of this. And the spend in this area is actually fourfold between 2020 and 2021. A lot more money is going into, especially venture capital money, into the area of energy storage, hydrogen, carbon capture, alternative proteins as an example, vertical farming, electric vehicles. We know that. The CEO of BlackRock made a very interesting observation. He predicted that the next 1,000 unicorns, and for those of you who don't know, a unicorn in business is a company that has the potential to hit $1 billion when it first starts up. So the next 1,000 billion-dollar companies will be coming in the area of climate tech. And that has great impact for the region. James, I know you're on the call and you're excited about this particular area, but it has great implications to the Caribbean and Caribbean business, particularly the tourism sector. The real challenge I see coming out of that trend, though, is what we call greenwashing. Greenwashing is when people make these superficial climate-friendly talk, ill-conceived business models for low impact, and it really waters down the impact of climate change, and it runs the risk of actually having companies run afoul of what the true purpose of climate tech means. I think we will also be seeing, call it the electrification of everything. Battery technology is making huge advances. I actually saw an ad where there's a battery-powered Nike shoe that changes during the day, depending on the size of your foot. Can you imagine implications for that for the average consumer? Of course, we know Tesla has hit a $1 trillion mark. The US government has indicated their ability to change over the entire US government fleet of 645,000 vehicles electric. I think that's going to have some far-reaching infrastructure implications to the Caribbean. We need to get ready. That has been on the discussion points in many conferences over the last 4 or 5 years, many of which I've participated in. The main issue for that, though, I'm seeing some challenges with some raw materials, lithium, cobalt. That's actually causing some geopolitical tensions. I think our next big trend we're going to be seeing that impacts our industries, particularly tourism, is we're in this whole era of ultra-fast convenience, instant gratification, and that combining that with a shift away from physical retail, and we have seen that especially during the pandemic. There's actually a great opportunity that will be taking shape in 2022 and beyond, where we see retailers combining these ultra-fast new models coming out. So restaurants and Uber Eats, DoorDash. For those of you, I live in Washington, D.C. I probably call Uber Eats and I have them on speed dial probably 2 or 3 times a week because my food gets here in 20 minutes. It saves me the task of, plus it provides employment. And I think that has implications for business. There are some aspects of real estate savings behind it. Several companies, especially in Europe, are now experimenting what is called co-location of services. So you have a hotel right next to an ultra-fast, convenient restaurant that can drop food to the visitors almost immediately. That has implications for the hotel and leisure market. There's tech, what is called tech stack development opportunities, where with these co-located infrastructure, we can actually track and prediction makes almost a just-in-time model, a new version of it coming out to replace. I think that's where the market is going to be going. Of course, there'll be an opportunity for diversified product introductions in the market. A very interesting thing, and you mentioned it, Tuna, you mentioned gastronomy. Let me touch on that. Where the world is going, we are going from farm to fork to lab to table. The market in, call it false protein, laboratory cultured proteins is taking off like never before. If you don't know this, let me tell you it now. The global meat market is about $2.7 trillion. And the US predicts that 1/3 of their meat supply will be from the laboratory by the year 2040. That has a lot of implications for farmers. It has a lot of implications for restaurants, implications for the regulatory process and how that is done, and how would that compete against your traditional meats for restaurants in the tourism sector, and how would that compete now with plant-based meats, your Impossible Burgers, your Beyond Burgers. All these restaurants are now going into it, KFC, McDonald's, etc. But think of where the mainstream of laboratory-produced meats will be going. Ed touched on this, and I think it's going to be a huge part of our economy going forward, including the tourism sector, where a new economy, an avatar economy is emerging. So we have B2B, business to business, G to G, government to government. There's now a D2A economy emerging, a direct to avatar economy. Believe it or not, out of morbid curiosity, I went in the virtual world to experiment with it. And I saw a Gucci handbag selling, a virtual Gucci handbag selling for $4,115. So you buy this false handbag and you give it to your avatar. So your avatar is now wearing Balenciagas for $8 and a Gucci handbag for over $4,000. That's where the world is going in this whole idea of metaverse and NFTs and digital identities. I think that has implications. I'm seeing companies actually buying digital storefronts. I know Barbados is the first country in the world to buy a digital embassy. And, where would that leave Jamaica? Will we be investing in virtual land, virtual beaches, a virtual dancehall party, virtual, food chats? That's where the world is going. And this whole idea of virtuality is a $190 billion industry. The other day, Ariana Grande did a virtual concert online in the metaverse. Over 20 million people attended. 20 million people, and they sold over $20 million in merchandise in a virtual space. Real money in a virtual space. So entertainment, that's a huge area. And coming out of all of that, we have, of course, crime. Crypto crime is emerging. I think it's going to be a huge area emerging in 2022. We are seeing Starbucks, Whole Foods, KFC, all these major brands accepting cryptocurrencies now in the form of Bitcoin. I think the tourism industry will have to begin at some point accepting this. Otherwise, they will be left behind. But it does have security and compliance implications, so we need to think about that. And for the last 2 minutes, let me just touch a bit on healthcare. I think narrowing down, taking these global trends into perspective, Ed touched on a number of them, so I wouldn't repeat them, but going into the healthcare industry for health and wellness and our well-being, I see new applications in AI emerging. I think it'll be a concern around the medical community. I talk to doctors, especially in Jamaica, almost on a weekly basis, and I know there are concerns about this. Practicing myself, I could tell you nothing beats sight, smell, touch, and feel when you're dealing with patients. But in this whole area of machine learning and biopharma, the whole idea of using AI technologies in healthcare, robotics, and hospitals for workflows, this is coming. This begs the question of data breaches. We have seen many, many concerns about privacy and confidentiality, particularly as it relates to patient information. What would that mean? We see new technologies now emerging with actually facial recognitions with people with masks. So, given the algorithms that calculate your contours on your face, we're now seeing that emerge with masks. And that has implications for the health industry. We saw in 2021, they launched nanotechnology using xenobots. So these things go into your bloodstream, they identify cancer cells, they self-replicate and destroy the cancer cells. That is going to be emerging. We see the Internet of Things. I don't want to repeat that, but all these wearable devices we wear, I think that's going to play a huge role in tracking patient information and improving patient care. And, smart implants, printing 3D models to implant into your body. That's now commonplace in developed countries. That's going to be taking off quite a bit. And the last area I want to touch on here is, which I think all of us should be aware of, I think the biggest leap we will be seeing in the next 10 years or so in healthcare is going to be in the area of data analytics. It's the new goal. Data is the new goal. And I believe the world has trillions of dollars to extract in getting actionable health information from fragmented healthcare data. And that's the area I'm most excited about. It's going to be my next big project. And I feel if we're able to aggregate this data using predictive analytics, we could be predicting and saving lives in a way that we have never seen before. And if it's one thing I want to end by saying, I was listening to Ed with fascination in terms of what he said and his enthusiasm for virtual reality and augmented reality. But, Ed, I think you're right. The future is bright. The future is virtual. The future is augmented. But I think we also have to ask ourselves, are we creating a virtual reality for mankind to run away from what is physical and what is natural? Can we undo what we have destroyed and make it better in real? Or are we just creating this false virtual world? Or can we cohabitate in both? I don't know. But there's another side to this enthusiasm that has me a bit worried. And thank you for the opportunity, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Parsa. That was quite what you'd call food for thought, from lab to table. That's actually the first time I'm hearing that term. You hear farm to table, but now lab to table is fully in mind. You touched on these emerging and exciting trends that should make life more convenient, but at the same time, we have to be mindful of the challenges. We have to ensure that as we evolve into the next normal, that we're also evolving the regulatory and the security measures to keep in step with how we're enjoying the technology. And you spoke about the wearable devices and how we might be moving forward. You spoke about Apple Watch possibly coming out with their watches that could test glucose levels. And our next speaker, when I asked her about her favorite, wearable technology or technology for travel and tourism, she did say her Apple Watch. So welcome to Daniel V. Pivot. Who's a web designer, CEO and co-founder of Pink Coconut, which is an LGBTQ travel and e-commerce platform focused on connecting travelers to experiences, spaces, and communities for people to thrive. Now, Z was given the prestigious Queen's Young Leader Award by Queen II and Buckingham Palace for their work as an LGBTQ champion advocate in 2015. Now, Z, we're going to welcome you now to speak about diversity and inclusion, and I think you've had a lovely platform set up that both sisters before touched on in their presentation, at least some elements of accessibility, inclusion, and diversity, and how technology and travel and tourism could assist with that. So, Z, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm really happy to be here. I know these last few years have been a whirlwind for a lot of us in the tourism space, and it only helps really propel the tourism space. Although I know a lot of the companies, much like mine, have been, somewhat looking at rooms from the effects of the pandemic. But what I want to do today is to talk about inclusion and diversity, but from my journey as a tech founder and as a startup founder, starting in Barbados during the time of the pandemic. I was able to travel from Barbados throughout the continent in Africa, and I spent a lot of time in the United States, and then I came back home where I am right now, back in Barbados. So during that time, I was able to see how travel and tourism was immediately affected and what the differences are across the different parts of the world. And I think what was interesting especially was spending time in some parts of Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, and Ghana, and then going directly to the United States. So that juxtaposition, I was able to notice a lot of differences and was affected by them. So I will be able to share that with you today. As it relates to inclusion and diversity, I also want to talk about the different ways that we as a Caribbean can take advantage of the different segments of tourism that exist today, whether it's LGBT tourism, where I'm focused on remote workers and digital nomads, which are somewhat the future and the present of the tourism economy in our destinations. And I know it was alluded to earlier about Barbados being one of the first to really embrace remote workers, and a lot of other Caribbean islands have done the same, whether it's LGBT tourism or even as it relates to the diversity of payments, which help, cater to different people in the tourism industry and how that affects us as Caribbean people. So I want to start by just giving an overview of e-commerce. And while I was here and building an e-commerce company as well, I faced a lot of challenges, especially in the region where many of our small businesses, are still grappling with, cash payments versus contactless payments, whether that's card or having these card authorization forms, and we're still working that out. So even though the world is tending to go way ahead, many of us in the Caribbean and even in certain parts of the continent as well are working with our various technologies to make it work. And while we're using platforms like Airbnb and the OTAs like Booking.com to, receive payments and so on, I find that, there's still not enough being done at the local level for, businesses to take advantage of the technology in order to improve their product, in order to serve people, and there's a lot to be done in that regard. Going over to the continent in Africa, and especially in Kenya and Ghana, one thing that, was really warming to see, and is something that I would love to see here in the region as well, is, digital payments. And digital payments and fintech is huge on the continent, especially in Nigeria, especially in West Africa, but all throughout the continent. When you see the M-Pesa or Safaricom, where we're able to just exchange payments just via text, and that's something that makes it accessible to everyone. And if we're going to be, competitive, we have to be inclusive. And by being inclusive, it means that we have to have a diversity of payment options, and easy ways to do that in the region, to cater to everybody. And we hear it all the time, whether it speaks to a diversity of our customers, whether it's appealing to LGBT people or appealing to local people. And that's something else that I can talk about briefly, where during the pandemic we found that there weren't any tourists coming to this these tourism economies, and now we have to tap back into our local economies. So I just wanted to make mention that even as Caribbean people, and as people across the world in general. So it's not necessarily just Caribbean people, but just to make sure that we honor and we always cater to our local markets, and we cater to our local markets. Not when tourists are nowhere to be found, but it's good business sense to cater to all people, and obviously for me, my segment is the LGBTQ market, which is one of the more lucrative markets in the there is really, because LGBT people travel 4 more times than other travelers, and that's simply because we often tend to have less children. We have less children, we have more time, more money. More time and money means more travel. So that's something that I would implore a lot of our Caribbean counterparts to tap into, and how we can really become inclusive and in being inclusive, whether that's appealing to our locals, whether it's appealing to LGBT people living with disabilities, tapping into different forms of payment in order to be accessible to everybody, and care about the needs and the needs and wants of people. It helps the bottom line. It helps the bottom line, but it also helps us. It helps us because, as we become more diverse, we one of the greatest lessons that of my life has been travel, and meeting different people and understanding people. And I feel like once we're able to tap into that, whether that's through commerce or whether that's through our or appealing to different markets, it benefits us. A few things that I wanted to touch on is during the pandemic, I was staying in, this was around March. My partner and I, we were in LA and we were in a hotel. And, the United States is just so fast on these things that, so you always have to keep your eye on the United States and it's specifically LA, which is really the epicenter of technology and the epicenter, not necessarily LA, California, sorry, the epicenter of technology and where, these new things are birthed. And I remember it was completely contactless at this hotel. I think it was the Dream Hotel. And there were very few people around, people working. And I remember, getting our food and our drinks and our, wine and so on, from a robot. And it was interesting. It was interesting, it was a real interesting experience. The phone would ring and the robot would be on the phone and it would say, I'm outside. And then you open the door because the robot said it's outside. So you put the phone down, you go out there and the robot says, hi, on this little screen. And then you open the top of the robot and then you take your drinks, your food out of the top and it goes, yay, thank you so much. And then it has this little rating system where you either, you give 3 stars, 2 stars, but it's always like the same experience every single time. So I don't even know what they're rating, probably the timing of it, but, it was really interesting for us to experience that. And I know now, robots are now doing a lot of food deliveries across California too. But I think for me as a non-binary and woman identifying person, sometimes it can be really jarring to have somebody knock on the door and you don't know what you're wearing and that kind of thing. So the benefits of having non-contact, with another human being can be interesting for women especially. And I think and I think that goes across the border, whether it's you are at an airport and you put in a couple coins to get your cart for your luggage versus red cap. We have to call them red cap in Barbados. Or even at Airbnb these days, you don't really come into contact with your host. You either retrieve your keys, and then you drop them off at the end. So we're seeing emerging, contactless, experience across tourism. And what does that mean? And what does that mean for our people? What does that mean for our experiences? And like I said, for me as somebody who's queer and, especially traveling to new places, sometimes it can be jarring to, connect with people who could be, discriminatory, who, could make you feel uncomfortable in some ways. And it makes us feel safe, when I, open that door for the robot, I don't necessarily need to, be the best dressed or, I just take what I need in there and then I run off. So, and whether that's, in the airport or wherever else, what does that mean when we have less contact and things are seamless and things are fast and efficient? But especially here in the Caribbean, we really, for years, we have promoted this idea of service with a smile. And making contact with people and friendly people. So I think it is worth a discussion. And I think the jury is still all out for me, how I feel about technology somewhat replacing face-to-face interaction, because there are major benefits. But I think, sometimes, you might want to welcome. And it depends on the person, but at the same time, I do think that it is certainly a way for travel and the experience to be efficient and for people to feel safe, every single time. So I certainly don't knock it. Another thing that comes up is the COVID experience and people not wanting to, be in contact with other people and what that says for health. So obviously, not having to open a door to a butler or to somebody who's in the service industry or whatever the case is, I feel safer because maybe the robot was sanitized and I just have to write it down. And so what does that say coming out of that COVID environment? So there are lots of different ways that travel has changed and it will continue to change. I think in the Caribbean and especially, we need to certainly upskill our people because as things continue to move forward and we are more reliant on technology, it means more people will have a lot more time on their hands, one, because, some of the mundane jobs are now being done by robots. And, in the Caribbean, we are especially dependent on tourism in our workforce and so on. So I think it's important that because of that, we begin to look to upskill our people so that we can all, survive in the end. Another thing that I wanted to touch on is that having built this marketplace that is Pink Coconuts, and what we're doing is that we're bringing in a lot of small businesses, and we are providing e-commerce option for them online and working with them on their ideas around inclusion and diversity, and working with them so that they're better equipped and trained and they understand how to work with LGBTQ people. But what I found is that a lot of our small businesses don't have a lot of e-commerce infrastructure at all. So we're trying to get that streamlined. And I think we're in a really good place to do that. But it begs the question, when a traveler is online and looking for things to do and want to be able to book beforehand and not having to transfer, the payments, what does that say? And I think Airbnb is a good example of how, removing that awkwardness of payment makes the experience more authentic. So if I'm staying with somebody and they've welcomed me in their home and they just give me the keys and told me to have a good time, and I don't have to exchange money, the experience is a lot more authentic. Yes, I've already paid them. Yes, the money is probably in escrow somewhere, but the interaction is certainly, much like Uber, you have a ride, and that ride is already paid for, and and you can have a wonderful conversation and not have to squabble around the fee or squabble around discounts and those kind of things. So those things make the experience more authentic. But a lot of Caribbean people, a lot of small businesses are still like, they like cash. They prefer cash. We like to feel the cash in our hands. And let me put this money in my pocket. So how do we get our people to then still appreciate, the seamlessness of online payments, the seamlessness of e-commerce, and the fact that because of e-commerce, things can be way more efficient. You don't have to then squabble around the foreign exchange, for example. You don't have to squabble around discounts, if I can get a discount, and these kind of things that make the experience a little uncomfortable. So this has been my challenge, building a brand like Pink Coconuts and using the e-commerce, because we've worked within about 9 different destinations, from Costa Rica to Puerto Rico, Barbados, Jamaica, St. Lucia, and a few other islands. And we found the same thing. A lot of people are not tapped into e-commerce as much. And hopefully we're in a position to help them through it. Just to touch on a few other things in this space. So I've done a little bit of research myself, trying to build this platform for a long time, and the emergence of chatbots as a tool to keep that efficiency going people always want answers, and sometimes when we put something online, people want to still ask questions. We have all the answers most of the time. People still want to reach out to ask questions. So then, how do we tap into that? So a chatbot is something that I think I see a lot of travel companies using, that makes the process more efficient. But we have a diversity of people. So like I said, I think if I should end at all, it would be that having a diverse options for your diverse segments is important. Whether that is using online payments and having visa payments, on site, and all of these different options set up businesses for success. Catering for people with disabilities, catering to the LGBT community, and using the language that people, and that's what tourism and travel is about. It's about feeling welcomed, and because people are coming from all across the world with different habits and different experiences. It's important for us as people in travel to be au fait and to be tapped in to those diversity of people, and having the diversity of payment options as well for them to take advantage of, and for us to take advantage of at large. And so I will end on that note, and just emphasizing the importance of inclusion and financial inclusion as well, and diversity to our bottom line, but to us as a people, because people are coming from all over the world, and so we need to be ready for everyone, and being ready for everyone means having diverse options available for each person. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Z. And I now need to check. Can you all hear me now? You know that commercial. Can you hear me now? Good. I see some. Okay, good. Fantastic. So Z, for those of you who did not hear the introduction, Z is a web designer, CEO, and co-founder of Pink Coconuts, which is a LGBTQ travel and e-commerce platform focused on connecting travelers to experiences, spaces, and communities for queer people to thrive. And in their presentation, you would have heard that clearly. Z was given the prestigious Queen's Young Leader Award by Queen Elizabeth II at Buckingham Palace for their work as an LGBTQ Caribbean advocate in 2015. And their favorite technology is a wearable device, Apple Watch, which, as we heard from Dr. Parsons' presentation earlier, speaking to how we're moving to remote patient monitoring with technology, the possibility of Apple Watch coming out with their watch testing your glucose levels, all these things that make technology convenient. But as was highlighted in their presentation, you have to ensure that we're looking at the challenges that we're facilitating, and we're fomenting growth for small, and in the case of some, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Thank you so much, Z. Now we move to our final panelist today. Oh, James, you have this honor. James Elsmore is an award-winning serial entrepreneur. He's CEO at Island Innovation and the co-founder and director at Solar Head of State. Recognized on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list for his work in sustainable energy, James is passionate about climate change, advocacy, and environmental policy with a focus on remote, rural, and island communities. And when I spoke to James earlier about his favorite technology in travel and tourism, it was a peer-to-peer opportunities for renting and accommodation. You know what that sounds like? That's your Airbnb. So welcome, James. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Taisha, for that introduction, and to Z, Ed, Neil for their wonderful talks so far. I wanted to talk very broadly when it comes to technology about really what I see as a societal shift in general, that obviously has a profound impact on what it means to be a tourist, and really what a tourist is in many ways. So clearly the last 2 years have been interesting for all of us, and the obvious change for a lot of people was all of a sudden working from home. For a lot of bosses, suddenly realizing, oh, I can actually trust my team. I can trust my workers to do their job without me looking over their shoulder or without me being in the same room as them. And this was actually something that existed before the pandemic. I started doing virtual events. Our flagship event, the Virtual Island Summit, we actually initiated pre-pandemic, 1 year before the pandemic, because we saw the opportunities in remote conferences. Now, clearly, we're all desperate for that human interaction, and there is such a thing as Zoom fatigue. And as Ed said at the start, nothing quite replaces the feeling of walking along a beautiful sandy Caribbean beach and feeling the sand and feeling the water and everything else, of course. But there are some serious impacts of what this is now allowing us to do with remote work. And I think one misconception to address at the start is that remote workers are just rogue backpackers. A lot of remote workers are very affluent individuals that are coming to spend money. And what is really important with those individuals is that often, compared to the traditional tourist, more of that money is staying in the local economy, because they're tending to use services that local people would use, which are often locally owned, small businesses, small boutique accommodation options. So that money, perhaps there's a lower spend per day than high-end tourism, but a higher percentage of that is staying in the local economy, which I think is a really important initiative for that could have a huge impact on the Caribbean tourism industry and tourism in globally. So I'll talk about what that means in a minute, and my experiences as a remote worker, a digital nomad, for want of a better word, and traveler myself. But I also think there's been a few misconceptions on what this shift to remote work means. I think one of the key ones is that there are different types of remote workers. So just as there are many different types of tourists, and we tend to segment that market into different types of tourists with different needs, different wants, there are many types of remote workers. So some of the best known programs, Barbados, obviously one of them, for the remote work visa. There are similar initiatives in Dominica and Malta. That visa opportunity aims at a specific type of individual. There's normally a minimum income requirement of around 50,000 US dollars per year. I think it varies from country to country slightly, but a reasonably high income requirement that's required, and also targets an individual that will stay in that country for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years maybe, and is not necessarily traveling. Now, I think that's one type of opportunity, but I think in general, what we're going to see, and this is completely my own theory, we'll see how this develops over the next few years. Instead of the traditional 1 to 2 week intense holiday, we'll see a gravitation towards medium stay holidays where you don't actually need one of these visas, but maybe you'll spend 1 to 2 months in the country and mix in your holiday and your work and try and get the best of both. Obviously, this is only open to, not every job can be done with this way, but I think that's going to be the general trend that we see. And so when that's a big opportunity in terms of technology, that people can really take up and contribute and have more of a relationship with the destination that they're staying in, and hopefully contribute to developing tech sectors and also working with entrepreneurs and startups in the country that they're visiting as well. That's, I think an interesting opportunity. So there are these two trends that we see: the remote work trend, which affects across the economy, but also there's a trend in community and what it means to be a community. So let me explain that a little bit. Traditionally, community was the people who lived on your street or in your town that you knew in your local area, and of course that still exists, community related to geography. But also community is now becoming something that exists in the cloud digitally, that you have a community of people with like-minded interests that might be on the other side of the world, but that you interact with on a regular basis. And that is an additional layer on what it means to community. Now, I think what's being missed by most destinations that have looked at attracting remote workers is a need for people to have a community at their destination. So yes, they need internet. Yes, they need visa and tax and whatever else is necessary. But ultimately, no one wants to go somewhere and then not be able to share that opportunity with anyone, or just be on their own, or even worse, stuck with their partner and not able to talk with anyone else at all in the whole time that they're there. So destinations need to think about how they can help that community develop And that is not just when the person is at the destination. Community exists before the journey, during the time on the island or in the destination, and afterwards as well. And I think that's a big shift in how we market tourism destinations and how we communicate with the consumer, with the tourist. So that may be as simple as something like a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group where people who are there locally are sharing their latest good restaurant experience, or their photos of the mundane daily activities that they're doing, that also then encourages that person to build a relationship through this digital format with people living in the destination, other visitors, and ultimately will encourage them to come back as well, and encourage this recurring visitor. So I would imagine that destinations, including Jamaica, including Barbados, will see this recurrent medium-term visitor, hopefully that comes back on a yearly basis for several months at a time, has this stronger relationship and can continue to feel part of a community beyond that. And we're actually already seeing this in another way. We're seeing this with diaspora communities around the world. People may never have been to the island or the place that their parents were born, but they feel even more connected now than perhaps 10, 20, 60 years ago, because they're able to engage with their family, with their friends, and build relationships through the internet. So fundamentally, technology has caused this change, and not just working on your laptop on the beach. As a side note, don't take your laptop to the beach. It's a terrible idea. It doesn't work. But it's more than just having your laptop and being able to work. It's your whole relationship with the destination that we need to think about. So both of these trends, remote work and community, are working in tandem to fundamentally change the experience of being a traveler, a tourist. And we and destination marketers need to be able to keep up with that in the way that they communicate with this remote workers. I don't think it's not the end of the package holiday, or it's not the end of 1 to 2 week vacations in the sun. Clearly, that market is still going to exist. It's a new market that suits a certain type of traveler. More likely, that traveler doesn't have kids. Not necessarily. People do these trips, and I know there were a number of people taking up the Barbados opportunity with their families. But in general, maybe it's someone who is at the stage of their life where they've suddenly got disposable income, but they haven't yet purchased a house, they haven't yet had their family, and they have that flexibility. So I'm sure we could go into a conversation there about the different segments of that audience, and I think that area is still developing. But clearly also, this remote worker, digital nomad traveler tends to be tech savvy, tends to be of a younger generation. But again, that's not exclusively. There are plenty of older and even retired people who are taking up this opportunity. And I think some of the fundamental things that need to happen with technology is perhaps people who are traveling are used to living in a big city like New York or London. They're used to having food orders from multiple restaurants that they can order on an app. They're used to Uber. They're used to everything being on an app. And those kind of services that are not available in all destinations and in many Caribbean islands are going to be things that consumer will demand. And so it's going to be interesting to see. There are plenty of entrepreneurs in the Caribbean working on tech solutions for food orders, for transportation, etc. Those kind of solutions are going to become more and more in demand by this type of worker. And as that demand grows, I'm sure the demand locally from Caribbean citizens will also grow for these kind of applications too. So that's why, to explain, I feel like I had to explain myself, Airbnb was my answer to Taisha's original question, because we don't think of that as cutting edge technology anymore. But for me as a traveler and someone coming to the Caribbean, Airbnb fundamentally changed how I interacted with the destination as well, and being able to build those relationships and have a more integrated experience living on a more average street as opposed to in a hotel a bit further away and removed from the host society that I'm in. So perhaps we can talk about this a little more in the Q&As, but that was my contribution to the technological shift. It's also a societal shift, And it's going to be really interesting to see how this sector grows and complements existing tourism trends and tourism businesses. But I think we are, if any businesses or destination marketers are not engaging with these remote workers, then they're missing a trick, because this is only going to grow as a sector that will have more and more importance for the Caribbean and other tourist regions. So thanks. Back to Taisha.
Thank you so much, James. And there you have it for our audience. You've heard from all your panelists, Ed Limon, Z. Pigot, Dr. Neil Parson, and James Elsmore. Now it's time to hear from you. So you're watching there in social media land. So I want you to start using those fingers to type. Send us some questions so that we can pose, and I'm already getting some questions, so we can pose to the panelists. But the common thread throughout this, technology, there are some persons who are aware of technology and they think it pushes you farther apart. But we're seeing here in all the presentations how technology can bring you closer, ending with James' presentation there, on just a greater sense of community and how you can tap into that to ensure that you're offering a diverse and inclusive product and service that is accessible and engaging to all or clients or tourists or travelers visiting or destinations. Now, with that said, my first question, I'm going to go to Dr. Parson. You had mentioned that nothing beats the tactile experience, tactile interaction. And even James said that clearly, it won't be the end of the package holidays, but still we had someone online who said, everything is going to be becoming fast obsolete, the work in the hotels and elsewhere. What would you say to someone who has this view? What kind of comfort could you give to someone who has this view? I'll go to Dr. Parson for this one.
Sure. No, it's a good question. And I think I believe in the phenomenon of product obsolescence, but I don't believe in the concept of human obsolescence. I think in some regards, technology will be not necessarily better at some of the responses and improve accuracy, timeliness, relevance, verifiability of human interaction. However, I feel in certain regards, the actual face-to-face communication, let's take your caregiver, let's take your nurse, let's take your doctor who's physically there with you, and I could speak in that industry. It will be very difficult to replace that type of psychological, emotional engagement, plus the actual tactile nature of the job in itself. I do a lot of public speaking in healthcare, and I often say the future of healthcare is virtual. The future of healthcare is digital. In fact, Harvard made a very bold statement about 2 years ago where they said the idea of a doctor's office will seem quaint in years to come. It wouldn't exist. They also made a statement that they believe that about 65% of all general practice or family practice visits will be handled as a one-off event over a digital platform. If that is the future of healthcare, it'll be one of convenience. It'll be one of that facilitates access, affordability, increasing demand. There's a clinical shortage of clinicians, of actual doctors. There's a lack of compliance. So technology can resolve some of those issues, but in many regards, it cannot replace it.
Like that ending note, it can resolve many of the issues, but it cannot replace it. So I hope that does offer some comfort to our social media audience member who did pose that question. The next question we have, we're going to direct to Z, given your presentation. Someone wants to know, how ready do you think our small, medium, and tourism enterprises are really for the new digital world, and what are the opportunities that you see for tourism players, especially in the area of human capital development?
Thank you for that question. Thank you for that. I feel optimistic because of the willingness. I think since COVID has happened, obviously people were in somewhat of a despair when travelers weren't coming. So a lot of businesses are now very, very willing to upskill, to tap into e-commerce payments and to get there. Do they have the opportunities right now? That is the question. Do they have the path to get there? That's the question. So we've been tapping into a number of different small businesses and so on, and the willingness to tap into new markets is there. The willingness to become more savvy and to have those diversity of payments and access, whether that's PayPal or have their own website and that kind of thing. The willingness is there, but I think there needs to be some kind of movement on the part of, yes, the individual businesses, but also governments to, deregulate the industry. There's a lot of bureaucracy around payments, around technology in the region, really. And I think it is the responsibility of our governments to try to make it as easy as possible for people to tap into the technology that is out there. So it's twofold, but I am certainly optimistic because there's a real willingness to upskill.
Thank you, Z. And optimism is always welcomed in this area. We have to be sure that we're embracing and we have to guide people along, because even myself, I feel the older I get, the less hesitant, or the more hesitant rather I am towards technology. I think I was sharing this earlier, and we were discussing how the babes are the younger ones, they're the ones who run with this technology. They're really into it, they're engaged, and they put a lot of us adults to shame. So I want to go to Ed. Your platform, virtual reality. I remember a discussion I was having with quite a learned professor who was a little hesitant about the VR world. They felt as if you could get lost in that world, and by extension, that some of our travels, they get lost in VR. They get so comfortable. I don't like skiing. I'm terrified of breaking any bones now, so I'm not going to go skiing down the Alps. But I might do a VR tourism experience skiing. What do you say to persons who have this trepidation towards VR, where they feel that it might either consume their lives, and so they don't want to come out and see the real thing? And this is a little separate from the tactile discussion. Ed?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I can answer that in so many different angles. I mean, and one of those angles would be those that have limitations right now as it is. So when you're looking at individuals at even retirement homes, so they have limitations to be able to travel, period, because they just can't leave their circumstance. What a beautiful way to be able to explore and to feel like you are at that destination, or you're exploring a location that you've been at, that you lived at so long time ago. And so again, when you look at limitations, that's one thing where people that's totally fine, right? What a therapeutical experience to go through that and to be able to leave the confines of your hospital bed, right? But I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not as concerned. I know that VR is definitely consuming, but it's not a concern of mine where people will just replace the real experience, because nothing does in comparison. And I've said that, and I appreciate some of the panelists bringing that notion up as well. Again, like I remember doing an activation for Sunwing Vacations where we had, it was the dead of winter in Toronto, and we had passerbys looking inside, peeping inside, looking at the activation, and we had this whole setup in place. We had the VR headsets ready. We had sand on the floor, a nice lamp, hot lamp, and pina colada. Like we did the whole 9 yards. People came inside. They took off their jacket, and it was almost like a 4D experience, if you will. They put on the headset, and they just felt like they were there. Would they want to stay a little bit longer? 100%. There's snow outside. I'm drinking a pina colada. But I can go here, right? And of course, there was different packages available right there on set. So again, I think if anything, I emphasize this motto all the time, that the VR and AR technology is there to educate, to inspire, to entice, not to replace the real experience. And I think that's the direction that most users go through. And I love that the doctor also brought up, how you can buy different things on VR platforms. I mean, there was an article not too long ago where you can buy land now, and someone invested $450,000 just buying land right beside Snoop Dogg's house, right in the metaverse, right? And so, this is just mind blowing as to what the direction that things are going. And just people being able to embrace. What if you have what if you're scared to talk to people? What if you're very reserved, right? And into yourself, introvert, if you will. This will allow you to be able to talk to people, therapeutically speaking, be able to come out of your shell and be like, you know what? I can be myself here, right? And so this definitely caters to just so many different individuals to want to explore, to want to overcome any limitations they may have.
Thank you, Ed. And what I'm realizing with the tone of the questions that we're getting is just that there's an underlying fear. So we really have to be open with the information. I think that we need effective communication for persons to be able to understand better the emerging technologies and how we can utilize it. Now, I have a question for James. Do you think Airbnb is the new staycation for visitors? And what recommendations do you have for small hotels or villas to stay relevant?
That's an interesting one. I think Airbnb is, for younger people, is the default. For a lot of people, and for more and more people, is the default that they will go straight to Airbnb. Of course, alternatives are available, but Airbnb is the biggest one. I do know people who use a variety of other similar services. And so that is the default that people will go to. Why? I think because people like the flexibility. And that is a different experience to your all-inclusive resort. All-inclusive resort, that demand will remain, certain type of tourist, but perhaps someone who is, if we talk about Jamaica, wants to stay and have the Kingston experience instead of the Montego Bay experience. That local experience, being able to go out to eat, engage in local eateries, get to know a location better. And again, I think the millennial generation and the upcoming generation is very much experience driven, and the Airbnb factor fits into that, as opposed to being in a hotel in which you could be in any country in the world. You don't necessarily know. You don't necessarily feel like you're in the specific country in some cases. I think there's an opportunity there for the small, medium, privately owned businesses to engage, but also acknowledge the changing and different needs. So if you're staying somewhere for 1 month, 2 months, you probably want a kitchen. You probably want to cook for yourself because you're not going to be eating out, going out to restaurants. So that availability, most hotels do not have a kitchen for their guests because why would you? You're on holiday. But so those kind of small behavioral changes, but actually having access to a kitchen is a big deal for many people. And so again, that's why an Airbnb might be available. So it seems like a silly small example, but making sure that there could be some kind of shared communal kitchen, or for newer developments, having that mini kitchen available in a suite could be something to think about. Other things, the fundamental importance of the internet, that is not a non-negotiable. You need to be 100% prioritizing that, just as you would prioritize running water, is the reality. Because if you are asking people to work remotely from your location and the internet goes down for an hour, that could be critical for someone's career, for someone's business. And so that, as I say, has got to be like electricity, water, internet, non-negotiables that you really prioritize. I'm sure there are plenty of other things, but those are some of the types of examples. And I think it would be important to research, to ask guests and to talk about people, maybe some of these things that you wouldn't necessarily consider, but ultimately it's a different behavior. Remote workers are going to engage in quite different behaviors in many respects than someone coming for their 1 to 2 week holiday would.
Thank you, James. And the final question, I'm actually going to give every panelist an opportunity to respond to this one. Can be quite short responses. Are there any challenges around 5G that could impact emerging trends in tech? Further, is there anything that travel and tourism businesses in the Caribbean can do to mitigate that risk? So I'll start in the order in which we began. I'll start with you, Ed, and then move to Dr. Parson, Z, and then James.
Yeah, absolutely. So with 5G technology, it definitely opens up Pandora's box in regards to the information that can go through the simple devices that we use every day, right? And so mobile devices. And when you talk about information transformation to be able to reach your hands, now you can download things that are much easier. You want to interact in a 3D world, you can do that now. It's a lot easier to do through that tech. And so the other component that's a hot topic right now that I can easily see transitioning is web VR. And so now the fact that you don't have to download an app onto your device, but you can interact with others on web VR. There's already platforms that allow you to do so. And that's through the power of 5G networks and making, the fact that it's becoming much more accessible, just again, opens up Pandora's box.
Dr. Parson?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll probably take it from two angles. One is the obvious. We have been hearing, for example, several airports in the United States claim that there's a possibility that 5G would physically affect, for example, some of the machines and the instruments on the aircraft. So it's banned. In fact, I actually have 5G on my phone at the moment, and in fact, it says 5G UC, ultra capacity, which is supposed to be the highest. My concern about it is a bit more social than it is technological, because here we are once again creating wide dysfunctional gaps in society, because there are still countries with 2G, 3G, and we have jumped to LTE. We have now gone to 5G, UC, etc. So, the whole idea of parity, equality, equity is that in as much as this is valuable, I fear we would widen those discriminatory gaps even further, because I believe as the world pushes ahead, that sense of being left out, and not just of the 5G physically, but all that comes with it, that Ed alluded to, and all the other possibilities, people will be further isolated. That's my challenge with
it. Z?
I like to look at things from a very optimistic perspective. And while I appreciate the challenges that would come from it as it relates to disparity across the world, I do think that there is a tremendous opportunity for increased productivity. And much like Limon alluded to, it would make, VR and AR more accessible to more people. And hopefully, as smaller nations begin to catch on, then we can begin to benefit from it as it relates to productivity, as it relates to speed, as it relates to efficiency. So I think the only thing that might be daunting is, yes, like the doctor mentioned, the disparity. But once we're able to fill that gap, I think we can all benefit from it in a good way.
Thanks, Z. James?
Well, not much to add that wasn't said already, but I again, putting forward this critical, the differentiator between places will be the availability of, is a really important role there for government to ensure that that connectivity is prioritized, and because that will have a huge impact, and we might see this in destination rankings that these kind of connectivity is given a bigger precedent for those type of tourism. And I think also for the business owners or destination marketers looking to promote their business, etc. We said before about small hotels, how they can engage. Things like being able to have this virtual long-term interaction through social media or through whatever else. Through, for example, a hotel owner might want to engage in a weekly live stream. Now, talking to give their hotel a face to the individual. That's very different than a glossy brochure with white sandy beaches. It's about the individual and the experience and the person and making that connection. And so going a little bit away from the original question on connectivity, but it's as important for people looking to market the business as it is for the visitors coming in as well.
Thank you, James, and thank you to the panelists and also to our audience there. Thank you for those questions that you posed. I don't see any further questions coming in on my trusty technology device here. So I just want to say, continue to follow TEF, Tourism Enhancement Fund, if you're not yet doing so, at TF Jamaica. And if you found this discussion quite exciting, I thought it was entertaining and enlightening, you can also follow our panelists and their organizations. You have Dr. Parsan at N Parsan. I think I got that correctly, at N Parsan. You also have James at Islands Innovate, that's Islands pluralized, Innovate, or at J Elmsmore. You have Z on at Zidonia Pigot or at Travel Pink Coconuts. And you can find Ed on LinkedIn, Ed Lemon, or Winged Whale Media, Winged Whale Media on social media. Now we're at the end of our program. To our audience members, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for those questions, which really helped to push the conversation and the discussion. Thank you to the Tourism Linkages Network for organizing these discussions, which really takes us. I always find it truly an educational process when I moderate, because I learned so much just from moderating these panels. And I'm hoping you in the audience, you're learning just as much too. I'm sure panelists, I saw them nodding. When other panelists were speaking, there are things that they were connecting with, perhaps learning more about. And of course, our esteemed panelists, thank you so very much. The issues that you touched on just really spoke to tourism. Tourism is a people-oriented, people-centered, with feeling. You have to feel the vibes. Even the robot, he's a robot, but he still was emulating a person, feeling the vibes. It was like, yay. And I'm sure, Z, you appreciated that when you had that experience. We're speaking of these seas. It might be less tactile contact, but we're looking for more connection and more community. And I think that's really a message that we can leave here with today. I was very happy to serve as your host and moderator, Taisha Turner, and I'm wishing you a beautiful day. If you really do want to keep in touch and follow these discussions, you can find it on TEF's social media pages, specifically on their YouTube page. So you can always go back and watch this discussion and the previous forums. Okay, thank you and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.